Assault allegations against Judge Brett Kavanaugh threatening to delay this week's vote on his nomination to the Judiciary Committee. His accuser now saying she is willing to testify before Congress. Judge Kavanaugh at the White House today as he issues another very strong denial. This is Outnumbered, and I'm Melissa Francis. Here today is the host of Kennedy on Fox Business, Kennedy, Town Hall editor and Fox News contributor Katie Pavlich, Democratic strategist and Fox News contributor Jessica Tarlov, and joining us on the couch today, former White House press secretary under George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor, Ari Fleischer. Boy, we have a lot to get to today, and we need your help. Are you ready for us?
I'm as ready as you can be for this one.
All right. We better get to it because there's a lot to do. Let's get started. Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee asking Chairman Grassley to delay a scheduled vote Thursday on Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and launch an investigation after a woman goes public with accusations of sexual assault when they were in high school. Some Republicans echoing calls to delay the vote. Christine Blasey Ford, she is now 51 years old. She's a university professor in Northern California, detailing her story to the Washington Post, saying a drunken Kavanaugh and another student trapped her in a room during a house party back in the early 1980s, and that Kavanaugh and another teenager held her down while he groped her. He then put his hand over her mouth when she tried to scream. Kavanaugh issuing a new denial, saying, quote, "This is a completely false allegation. I have never done anything like what the accuser described to her or to anyone else. I am willing to talk to the Senate Judiciary Committee in any way the committee deems appropriate to refute this false allegation from 36 years ago and defend my integrity." All this is the attorney for Kavanaugh's accuser saying she is willing to testify before the Judiciary Committee.
She is. She's willing to do whatever it takes to get her story forth, yes. She has taken a polygraph. She's a credible person. These are serious allegations, and they should be addressed.
And while the White House stands behind Kavanaugh, who denies the accusations, counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway, says his accuser should not be ignored.
Well, this woman should not be insulted and she should not be ignored. I think the Senate is headed to a reasonable approach, allowing this woman to be heard in sworn testimony, allowing Judge Kavanaugh to be heard in sworn testimony about these specific allegations would be added to the very considerable mountain of evidence and considerations that folks will have when they weigh whether or not to vote for Judge Kavanaugh.
Peter Ducey has more from Capitol Hill now. Peter.
Melissa, 0 of the 10 Democrats on the Judiciary Committee were expected to vote for Kavanaugh on Thursday when they're expected to send his nomination to the Senate, but all 10 of those Democrats have now signed on to a letter calling for a pause in the process. And part of the letter says this: all senators, regardless of party, should insist the FBI perform its due diligence and fully investigate the allegations as part of its review of Judge Kavanaugh's background. Staff-level examination of these allegations should not go forward until the FBI's career professionals with the requisite investigative experience have completed their review. So far, just one of the Republicans on the Judiciary Committee wants to slow things down. That's Senator Jeff Flake. He says he wants to hear more from Kavanaugh's accuser first, a sentiment shared with another Republican who's not on the committee, Senator Bob Corker. We are still waiting to hear from 2 other Republicans whose positions aren't entirely clear. Those are Senators Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins. Their votes are considered critical to confirming Kavanaugh. Something everyone seems to be wondering on the Republican side, though, is about the timing of this. The Republicans on the Judiciary Committee say in a statement, it's disturbing that these uncorroborated allegations from more than 35 years ago during high school would surface on the eve of a committee vote after Democrats sat on them since July. So now we wait to hear from the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Chuck Grassley. Is he going to schedule a hearing where we can hear from Kavanaugh's accuser and Kavanaugh himself? Is he going to delay the proceedings scheduled for Thursday to vote out of the committee on Kavanaugh's nomination, send it to the full Senate? We don't know yet, but we do expect to see him back here at his office sometime soon. Melissa?
Peter Ducey, thank you so much. Ari, if she's brave enough to come forward and speak before the committee, isn't that the way things should go at this point? What do you think?
There's only one thing that can happen, and that is she needs to have her day in court, and he needs to have his. They both need to come and testify under oath to the Senate Judiciary Committee and let the senators make independent judgments about the honesty, the validity, the context, whether it's true, not true, misremembering or not. And remember, Judge Kavanaugh has 100% denied it. He needs to be put to the questioning as well. And then the constituency who watches it. We, the American people, can watch and weigh in with our senators to see if we believe or don't believe. It's a very sad end to what's been a relatively good substantive process until now.
Yeah. Jessica?
I agree completely with Ari, and I think that you will start to see more bipartisan support for that as the end result here, not just from the senators on the Judiciary Committee, but across the board. Sunday was very different from Friday when we heard these accusations coming out that it was so quick for her to put her name to it. As for whether Democrats were sitting on this, my understanding is that Dianne Feinstein, and you can see the letter that she sent Senator Feinstein published as well on the internet now, was very clear that she wanted this to be kept confidential. And that's what Dianne Feinstein was trying to do to protect her identity here. But the day in court is the only way forward. And we really need to grapple with the fact that we have now become a society that believes women. Things are very different from when Anita Hill stood up there and Clarence Thomas was getting confirmed. We've seen a lot of very powerful men lose their jobs, lose their seats. Al Franken lost his seat in the Senate as a result of this, and we have to be thoughtful and fair and make sure that every woman knows that her story deserves to be heard, and I applaud Kellyanne Conway for coming out with that message today. It was not what I expected to hear.
No, and she was very steady and very firm in what she said from the White House. I mean, Katie, now lots of people are coming up with mitigating circumstances on every side. There is a report in the Montgomery County Courthouse that Brett Kavanaugh's mother, Judge Martha Kavanaugh, foreclosed on the accuser's parents' home. Years ago. Nope. Now I'm hearing that she did not rule on that case. See, these are the circumstances that
That's
are
how
going back and forth.
Yes.
As you're seeing more evidence come out on one side or the other.
Right. I just want to say, yes, we are a society that takes women's accusations seriously, but we're also a society that believes in innocence until proven guilty.
Sure.
And at this point, we are only basing these allegations on words that cannot be proven. She can't prove anything necessarily about what happened, and Brett Kavanaugh can't prove that it didn't happen or that he didn't do these things. And so that's where we are. It's extremely frustrating to look at the timeline here. It's very difficult to accept that this wasn't a political calculation, considering the timeline of Dianne Feinstein finding out about this in July, this woman going to the Washington Post, and then this argument that Dianne Feinstein was trying to protect her identity, but then released this statement last week that she has an anonymous woman who wants to come forward with these accusations.
Apparently that came after reports that this was getting leaked out, and that's why she tried to get in front of it.
For her to come out with a public statement that she knew was going to get all of the media attention by saying, I'm referring this letter to the FBI, of course her identity was going to come out, and if she wasn't part of this political process, the pressure would be on because Dianne Feinstein released that statement. Finally, I want to say, Democrats were saying this has to be delayed for an FBI investigation. The FBI received this letter from Dianne Feinstein. They looked at it and said, there's not enough evidence to go off of here. We're going to put it into his record with the White House. And so for them to be saying we need a thorough FBI investigation, they already looked at it and come to a conclusion that it can't necessarily be thoroughly investigated because it happened so long ago and there's only 3 witnesses involved.
I hear that, but Kennedy, we've learned something from sitting on this couch a lot and watching these hearings happen a lot of time during this hour, is that when people sit up there and they tell their story, you do as a viewer get a sense of kind of who you believe.
Yes.
And, isn't there something to that? Like, if they both sit there and have their moment, don't you feel like people out there watching will get a sense of who they believe?
Yeah, and I think people are also much more informed than they have been, when we're talking about like the Iran-Contra hearings and people's emotional response to Oliver North and Clarence Thomas versus Anita Hill, and people finding who they emotionally connected with. But the facts are critical here, and something that's inconvenient for both sides is all of these things can be true at the same time. The question is, where do we go from here? So if Judge Kavanaugh somehow loses this confirmation fight or withdraws his name now from consideration, who does the president nominate? And is there a backlash against Democrats for that, for compressing this timeline testifying and bringing up the information so late in the game, which seems very unfair to the process. Now, are Democrats rolling the dice that they will have the Senate majority after the midterms, and that's why they're doing this as, you know, a quid pro quo against the Merrick Garland nomination?
Right.
So, and I think voters could be really upset by that, because we were having a substantive conversation. There were senators, Democrat and Republican alike, who were posing, you know, challenging questions to this judge. But now, where do we go with this process, and what is the threshold in this conversation we're having about the Me Too movement?
So, Ari, I mean, obviously the most important thing is to try and figure out what the truth is. Way beyond that is the political implications. And Kennedy brings up this idea of a potential backlash. I mean, as this plays out closer and closer to the midterms, it does have the potential of firing up the right, even the never-Trumpers, to come out, because having a judge has proven to be one of the things that motivates them to the polls.
I think it's too early to say, and it all depends on what happens when they both have that day in court. And if the right feels that Judge Kavanaugh is being the victim of something that's unfair and is not provable, then it will probably fire up the right. If, on the other hand, she comes across as eminently credible and he doesn't, then it's going to put a lot of pause into the right, because they're going to think, we just can't win. No matter what happens, it doesn't work. But there's a bigger ethical issue I want to get to here, too.
Yeah.
And I want to say this with a lot of sensitivity, because these are sensitive issues. But high school behavior. How much in society should any of us be held liable today when we've lived a good life, an upstanding life by all accounts, and then something that maybe is an arguable issue took place in high school? Should that deny us chances later in life, even for a Supreme Court job, a presidency of the United States, or you name it?
Yeah.
How accountable are we for high school actions when this is clearly a disputable high school action?
Yeah,
that's a tough
as
issue.
minors.
As minors. And you're not saying he's not accountable. You're just saying this is a conversation that we should have. I would also say that in this Me Too era, one thing we've noticed is that one person comes forward, and then there's either a whole bunch of other people that come forward saying that person did something to me, or no one else comes forward to say that person also did the same thing to me, and that can be telling.
And I do want to, what we're going to see here is that anybody who dares to question the timeline of the story, her version of events, is going to be accused of attacking the witness, denying her story, not taking her seriously, when there are very legitimate questions to be asked here. And I think that the conversation that's been had around this and some of the accusations made by Brian Fallon, for example, who worked for Hillary Clinton during the 2016 campaign, they are saying now, well, this is why Brett Kavanaugh hired so many female clerks. And this is why Brett Kavanaugh was a female basketball coach, impugning his character that way and implying that the reason he was hiring women, which I thought the left was all about, and coaching his children's basketball team was a way for him to kind of prey on other women. That kind of accusation is just so abhorrent and disgusting. And so there are two sides to this. I hope we get to the bottom of it. I think they should each be on an equal playing field. I think his word is equal with hers at this point. There is zero proof that we've seen in terms of hard evidence, and that is what we have to go on.
Can I just say, I totally agree with you. I actually didn't see that Brian Fallon comment. I in no way think that this has any bearing on how Judge Kavanaugh has lived his life since, and the basketball team and all that. I understand why they did bring out those people to speak to his character. That doesn't mean there isn't legitimate concern about what he did then or how he would rule in judicial opinions, which is really what this is all about. But to your point about what we could be held accountable for when we are teenagers, this gets back to the conversation we had post-Access Hollywood tape about what's locker room talk or what's boys being boys. And I don't have a son.
Dying in Teddy Kennedy's car. And then
absolutely, but we can't get back
hero for decades.
Wait. I want to shut it down there, because we're getting way too much into comparing this person from the past, not political thing, and we need to talk about this woman.
The question is, are you offended because this guy's on the other side? And if the shoe is on the other foot, and if
I'm offended because he might have put his hand over a woman. A young girl's mouth to not hear her scream.
We can no longer have subjectivity. We have to have objective standards. That's only fair.
We have to hear from both of them, and we have to clear our minds of whatever other baggage we're trying to bring to this case, and listen to what they both have to say. It seems to be the only way forward.
Otherwise, you're right, because otherwise there's a cloud over him. He cannot be confirmed under these conditions.
Newly released bombshell testimony from former FBI official